There are two sides to combat in Bug Fables, offense and defense. In this video, we'll be going over the aspects of offense in Bug Fables, from attacks to medals. Hopefully you learned something. Without further ado, let's take it from the top. Let's start with attack power in this game and ways to do more damage. You have a base 2 attack power across all 3 bugs. The bug in front has an added attack point, which is signaled by the red arrow on the top of the screen under their HP. A common tactic to maximize damage early game provided the enemy has defense or elemental weaknesses, and turn relaying them an extra turn to hit a second time. Examples include jelly shrooms with Leif in front, numb nails with Kabbu in front, or in the case of bosses, either Venus Guardian or B33 while airborne with V in front. Attack power typically does not increase beyond its base without medals like Power Exchange or Hard Charge. I talk about these medals more in depth in my medals tier list, but A, my feelings towards that list are no longer accurate, and B, it'd be nice to show more thorough examples of these medals in action. We'll be going in order of availability. Now, unlike all other medals that increase your attack power, Favorite One actually benefits the bugs that don't have it on. The bug with this medal equipped will take 1 extra damage from enemy attacks, but the other 2 bugs gain +1 charge from seeing the equipper get hurt. They have to flinch from the damage, so stuff like Life Cast or the later to be discussed Hard Charge will not trigger this medal's effect. If you can consistently get targeted and survive, this medal can do a great job at keeping your attack stat high. And since charge carries over, it can lead to very high damage output for attacks that strike multiple times like these Tornado Toss. The next medal when equipped can turn something as dangerous as being poisoned and turn it on its head. Poison Attacker is the first of many trade-up medals that boost your attack stat, giving +1 attack for each equipped to the equipper, so having both Poison Attacker medals equipped to one bug will increase your attack by 2 when poisoned. A common tactic with medals like this, and the next few down, is relaying turns to bugs with these types of medals equipped. With enough attack, it outweighs the detriment caused by exhaustion. Just be aware that over time your HP will decrease, and having low HP makes the medal last attack much more lethal. This medal boosts your attack by +1 for each equipped when having your HP at 4 or less, in a similar vein to Poison Attacker. This is a medal that benefits greatly from having good defensive tactics like Kabbu's Taunt or Leif's Bubble Shield Light to either redirect or outright block damage. It also synergizes very well with the next medal we talk about if you're not worried about fainting. Moreover, Miracle Matter and Kabbu's Pep Talk will both keep your HP at 4 or less. Acquiring both last attack medals can be tricky as both copies are locked behind bounty rewards, but they are very well worth the trouble if you can manage to get them. Now, Power Exchange is likely the most popular pick for a flat up boost to your attack power. When equipped, your attack goes up by 1 at the expense of your defense being reduced by 1. It's a simple trade-off that has largely the same benefits as last attack, but is much easier to obtain. The only real drawbacks are the cost being slightly higher, and losing defense makes having higher HP more desirable. It reduces the effectiveness of medals like Last Stand and Super Block Plus. That being said, redirection is a thing, and it's just as potent. Now for Berserker, and it's less conventional than most other medals, but it has niche advantages. The bug with this medal equipped gets a flat +3 attack bonus, but the drawback? That bug cannot use items, cannot relay turns to others, and can't even use skills. The latter, however, has one exception, and that's if a team skill is being used. It has to be used from another bug that involves the bug with the Berserker medal equipped to fight. They still have insanely high attack power, and can in some way use TP. Otherwise, this medal has very many drawbacks that make it very unappealing to consider. It pairs decently well with Strong Start if you want to get 2 strong hits in the beginning of the fight, and then after that first attack, you'll use their extra turn to position them in the back or something, but it's still less reliable than Taunt or Bubble Shield Light. Now, if there's any medal I'd buff in this game, it's Antlion Jaws. It only affects your basic attack, and allows you to ignore 1 point of defense for each copy of this medal you have equipped. It functions similarly to Kabbu's basic attack in terms of attack properties, and having multiples of this medal equipped will only benefit you if the target has the defense to match how many copies of the medal you have on. I recommend using this medal on a bug with Berserker. After all, they can't use skills anyway. Otherwise, its only draw is how easy it is to get when available. Finally, we get to Hard Charge, one of the most popular methods of increasing your attack stat to exist. It's a skill that boosts your charge stat to +3, giving your next attack 3 more attack power. Having a high HP stat or means of regularly restoring HP can make this a rather attractive option in battle, whether they be skills like Sharing Stash or just items like Queen's Dinners. It's also a skill that pairs very well with Last Attack, dropping your HP to 4 or less and as a result boosting your attack stat by 4 or even 5. There's a lot of potential synergy with Last Stand and HP Core too, where you can cycle your HP to stay low and restore it with the following turn to charge again and attack for massive damage. I would know, as I have used this very tactic doing the BOSS EX mode with only V. It's a very attractive meta for what strategies it enables, and it leads me to believe that you can't really go wrong with it. There are other skills also, like say Empower and Break, you know, metas that enable more skills for Leif to use, but they're really just buffs and debuffs. All you really need to know is that the standard editions of the metas only last for 2 turns, while the plus versions actually last for 3 turns. It's worth noting also that attack up and attack down statuses do not cancel each other out. Instead, what happens is that your attack up status will take priority over your attack down status. There also exists both charge up and charge up plus. The former grants +1 charge to a bug, and the latter grants +1 charge to all 3 bugs. Whereas both attack up status and defense down status can only wear off after enough turns have passed, charge will carry over until your very next attack. After that one attack though, your charge status will disappear. For most attacks, this will persist until the end of that one attack, though to my knowledge, an exception exists in Frost Relay. In that move, the charge status will disappear after just one attack from the bug with charge. Other attacks, for example like say V's Needle Toss, will have each individual hit benefit from either your attack up status or your charge status, whereas your base attack can actually have needles do less or more damage to compensate. Attack up, attack down, and charge affect literally every hit of Needle Toss, not just the first. No exceptions. With all that said, there's just one more thing I have to mention right now, and that's the item called the Super Pepper. These key items are very rare, and are only available very late in the game at the beginning of Chapter 6. To buy even one will cost you 150 berries, but they permanently increase your attack stat by 1. No strings attached, and no drawbacks. It's worth mentioning also that only 2 exist for the entire game, and the other one is locked behind the post-game. This right here is the absolute closest you are ever going to get to a direct attack upgrade in any way similar to Paper Mario. It's well worth the cost, but if you ask me, this game gives you plenty of options if you're creative enough to play with the tools you're given. And speaking of tools, let's now talk about all the attacks of Team Statemouth and what they have to offer. First things first, all 3 members of Team Statemouth have basic attacks. Kabbu's can only target the character directly in front of him. To compensate for this, it also does 1 additional damage point against foes with natural defense. Enemies with armor like say Numbnails or Anichas can be forced to lower their guards in different ways. One can raise his guard and then be forced to lower it, like say Denmuki, Iron Nails, or Wasp Drillers. And other enemies can be flipped over, like Acornlings. Meanwhile, both V and Leif have ranged attacks. The big difference being that Leif cannot target enemies in the air, and V cannot target enemies underground. Leif's basic attack also does additional damage to enemies that are weak to ice. Now let's talk about the skills. Starting with V, her first skill is Tornado Toss. Whatever V's current attack stat is, this skill will reduce it to 1 and then do 4 hits if you land all the action commands. Each successive hit does 1 less damage than the last. If the numbers ever drop to 1, it will never go below 1 damage and start doing 0. The only way for this attack to do 0 damage is if the attack was doing 0 from the very start. Most of what could be said about Tornado Toss applies to Hurricane Toss as well. Additionally though, if the target has at least 1 point of natural defense, Hurricane Toss's attack power is increased by 1. The first hit also flips over enemies and unnerves burrowed foes. In short, you're never safe. Moving on, we have Needle Toss, another ranged attack. V splits her beam ring into 2, flies into the air, and throws her needles at enemies. This attack hits twice and once again has -1 attack from starting attack power. Its main draw is that it ignores all defense upon contact. Aiming this attack is similar to Parakarry from Paper Mario 64 with Shell Shot. To calculate how much damage the needles will do after the first hit, keep this in mind. If V's attack stat is between 0 and 4, the following needles will do 2 damage. For every point less or more than that range, the following 1 or 2 hits will do less or more. The damage from Needle Toss will also reset its damage to the power of its first hit when it makes contact with a different target. Needle Pincer, however, functions a little bit differently. The initial hit is stronger, but it also can only target the foe directly in front of her, like Kabbu's basic attack. I did some testing so you can also see for yourself just how much damage you can expect to see from Needle Toss and Needle Pincer, depending on V's starting attack power. Note also that the ADBP enhancer does not affect the damage of the first 2 hits of either Needle Toss or Needle Pincer. And finally, Heavy Throw. It hits only 1 time, and the damage varies depending on how full the bar is. If you max the bar out, it also lowers enemy defense. After the boomerang makes its mark on the target, you can catch it on the rebound to avoid recoil damage. If you fail to catch it, you'll be taking 3 damage in return, and it calculates your defense, not your attack power. It also triggers Favorite One. Kabbu's Heavy Strike does +2 damage from starting attack power. Unlike his basic attack, it's also guaranteed to flip foes whether or not the action command is successful. The properties otherwise are identical to the basic attack. Understrike sees Kabbu burrow under the ground to attack enemies. All enemies within horizontal range, whether grounded, underground, or airborne, are hurt by this attack. This attack also ignores any and all defense, and the second hit will do 1 less damage from the first. It's also guaranteed to do at least 1 damage point. Exceptions exist, however, like golden ceilings or the tablet in the Everlasting King fight. Targets with question mark defense are unaffected by Understrike. Dash Through strikes all grounded enemies that are not underground. It deals +1 damage from Kabbu's starting attack power, and flips foes over whether or not you actually manage to max out the meter. It also always flips foes even on hard mode. Pebble Toss is a ranged attack. It cannot target underground foes, and only does 1 damage. It's also entirely unaffected by Exhaustion, and can bypass certain HP triggers like Versus the Beast. Boulder Toss is a ranged attack. Cannot target underground foes, it does +3 damage from starting attack power. Upon contact with the enemy, it also deals splash damage to nearby foes. These splashing rocks have -4 attack power. Unlike every other move Kabbu has, this attack is affected by defense. And now for Leif. Icefall is a ranged attack. It deals damage to all enemies within range. It cannot reach underground. If you're lucky, it may also inflict frozen status for 1 turn. Enemies weak to ice also take 1 additional point of damage. Frigid Coffin is also a ranged attack. It can target any foe on the ground or under the ground. Cannot target airborne foes. Deals +2 damage from starting attack power, as well as +1 damage against foes weak to ice. It may also freeze the target for 2 turns. Ice Rain is a ranged attack. Hurts all enemies within range, cannot reach underground. Hits 4 times, and each individual hit may inflict frozen status for 1 turn. Damage is consistent for all hits. Now we have the team attacks. First up is Frozen Drill. This attack is ranged. It can target any foe on or under the ground, cannot target airborne foes. The first 3 hits ignore defense. Damage is calculated by taking the combined total of Leif and Kabbu's attack power, dividing by 2, and adding 1. The last hit has +1 attack. The front attack bonus is not applied. Pressing less than 3 buttons correctly, Kabbu will only do 1 damage with no drill. Pressing between 3 and 5 will have the drill proceed normally, but with reduced damage. All 6 buttons being pressed will maximize the damage output. The last button being pressed correctly will both increase the final hit's damage, but also will potentially freeze the target for 1 turn. Frost Relay is a ranged attack. Can target any foe in the air or on the ground. Cannot target underground foes. Alternates between Leif and V in that order. Damage starts from each individual's base attack and then progressively goes down each hit. Leif's attacks can also freeze. If either V or Leif is in front, both characters receive the front attack bonus. Damage can drop to 0 if neither V or Leif is in front or the enemy has at least 1 defense. Otherwise, the move does at least 1 damage per hit. If either Leif or V is in front and they relay their turn to the other one in the middle, damage is unaffected. If either bug is in front and uses an item, it will reduce the damage of Frost Relay as if there's no attack bonus for the bug in front. If either of these 2 bugs are in the middle and they use an item, this drawback will not apply. Fly Drop is a ranged attack. It can target any foe in the air or on the ground. Cannot target underground foes. Damage depends on the combined attack stat of V and Kabbu +4. Ignores all defense. The more full the meter, the more damage dealt, and the more time you have to press the button. Meter must be at least half full. Front attack bonus is not applied. Frost Bowling strikes all grounded and airborne targets. Underground foes are only hurt by the explosion. Damage is the combined attack power of your party. Front attack bonus is not applied. The bowling ball can freeze both on contact and upon detonation. You can only detonate the ball if you hit at least 5 of these buttons and you successfully land Kabbu's action command. If Kabbu misses, the damage is reduced by about half. Depending on when V detonates, the blast will damage all enemies nearby. The blast radius for 2 less damage than the impact of the bowling ball. Chompy. One of your rewards for defeating Mother Chomper is a baby chomper that goes by the default name Chompy. She always attacks last after everyone else has their turns be taken, and can either bite the frontmost target on the ground, or do nothing. She cannot reach enemies that are either airborne or underground. If you have ribbons in your inventory, she can also use her turn to equip one of them or swap the one she's currently wearing for another. Depending on the ribbon she has equipped, it can influence her bite. Having no ribbon on will have her bite do 2 damage. Equip the pretty ribbon, her bite will do 3 damage. The Venom ribbon, her bite will do 2 damage with a chance to poison for 2 turns. The Drowsy ribbon, her bite will do 2 damage with a chance to induce sleep for 2 turns. The Shocking ribbon, her bite will do 2 damage with a chance to induce none for 1 turn. Please note, to induce the saddest elements from these past 3 ribbons will require TP to be exhausted. And finally, the Team ribbon. Her bite will do 2 damage and restore 1 TP if the attack successfully does damage.